I hereby call to order this meeting of the District 200 School Board. Mrs. Hutchison, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Crabtree?
Here.
Mrs. Erickson?
Here.
Mr. Gambiani is absent. Mr. Hanlon?
Here.
Mr. Matheson?
Here.
Mr. Paulson?
Here.
Mr. Vroman?
Here. Would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we go through the agenda tonight, I understand we only have one speaker for public comments, and in order to accommodate this one speaker, I'm sure he would love to sit through the entire meeting tonight. But I'm going to ask for a motion and a second to modify the agenda for tonight so that we can have the public comments at the beginning of the meeting rather than at the end. And that's moved by Mr. Matheson. Seconded by Mr. Hanlon. Mrs. Hutchison, would you please call a roll?
Mr. Matheson?
Yes.
Mr. Hanlon?
Yes.
Mrs. Crabtree?
Yes.
Mrs. Erickson?
Yes.
Mr. Paulson?
Yes.
Mr. Vroman?
Yes. The motion to modify the agenda is passed. So we'll have public comment. Mr. Dorp?
Why, go somewhere, or, yeah. All right, is you okay?
Yep.
Good morning. Okay. I understand like 3 minutes, so I'll try to, I hate reading from prepared remarks, but let me just do it just so I don't babble on too long. My name is Joe Dorp. My son Josh is a junior at Wheaton North. Josh is my third son. I've had kids continuously in this district for 26 years. I've been a dad a long time. This is my first time addressing the board, and I understand, well, I'll try to keep this short. At the end of my short time today, I do hope we have some follow-up. I know this isn't my point, my time here isn't to elicit reactions and that kind of stuff. I just wanted to share some things. And I hope if you guys deem it appropriate, we continue a dialogue in some way, shape, or form. My goal today is awareness. Speaking of awareness, I understand 2 things. Number 1, you as school board members are, quote, guardians of the public trust. My trust is shaken, and that's why I'm here. Number 2, as far as awareness goes, what I'm about to share tonight is fully known by teachers, Vice Principal Alexi Ellett, and Principal Matt Biskin. I worked with them for a long time, starting last year. And then on advice of Matt Biskin, I talked to Jeff. I sent you an email and put this with Faith. And Faith and I have had dialogue on this topic. It's been helpful. It's been welcomed. I even brought Josh and my son, last year was a sophomore, met with Faith. And we went through some of these issues, kind of related tangentially and or directly to what I'm about to talk to you about tonight. So what is this year's matter? I mentioned some of this dialogue started last year. And so what's this year's matter? Why is my trust shaken? Well, I have here the junior English syllabus from Ms. Rauch. It lists 3 novels for the semester. And I recognized Huck Finn, and I recognized The Great Gatsby, but I did not recognize Tonto and the Lone Ranger Fistfight in Heaven. I just wasn't aware of that text. So doing what most people do, I Googled the title, and what I found was you can find a lot of information about that book, and you can find the whole book is actually available online. It's just all right there on a PDF file, and or searchable text, and or whatever else. And so let me read you just an excerpt from the book. In one dream, she was a missionary's wife, and I was a minor war chief. We fell in love and tried to keep it a secret. But the missionary caught us fucking in the barn and shot me. Now, in case you're wondering, that's only merely one of the many uses of profanity and the F word throughout the text. Now, in the classroom, the teacher handed out a printed version with the profanity blacked out, redacted. However, when you read it in context, what the is going on here, redacted word. anyone's going to know. When the alcoholic father rages in those terms, you pretty much know what he said. And in case you ever want to know, if you just Google, for example, "but the missionary caught us," quote, "but the missionary caught us," unquote, and you hit enter, the first thing that pops up is all the text in clear text. Google's not going to redact that. So, this morning, just as of literally this morning, I continued having a dialogue with Wheaton North, and I spoke with Alexia Ellett, who assured me that they're working on getting rid of this text, and in general, getting rid of text that requires redaction. And she went on to say they have a formal review process to prevent similar things from happening again. Now that sounds great, but I'm like, if you had a process, how did this happen? I've come to learn that this has been going on, this text has been used for literally years. And in fact, one of the things that prompted me to initially dialogue with Jeff and Faith was a whole bunch of other redacted text that was used by the same author and by the same English department and the same folks. So if you can understand why, even though she just literally 6 hours ago told me that we're working on it, we have processes in place, it just doesn't add up. Either the process doesn't work, isn't being handled, there's rogue players out there, or you approve it. Right? I mean, if I'm the crazy parent that's thinking this is okay, because I was also told that the board approved this. This is board approved literature. So again, my trust is shaken because of all the review processes and all the education represented by everyone. Apparently the best we can do as the district and an English department is use profane, redaction requiring English text to teach English. And again, my goal this time was awareness, and now you're aware. We'll take any questions, but I have emails and text and anything else you want to see me about. So,
Thank you, Mr. Burke. I hereby ask for a motion to suspend the rules and adjourn to a workshop setting.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Crabtree. Seconded by Mrs. Erickson. Ms. Hudson, would you call the roll?
Mrs. Crabtree,
Yes.
Mrs. Erickson,
Yes.
Mr. Hanlon,
Yes.
Mr. Matheson,
Yes.
Mr. Paulson,
Yes.
Mr. Vroman.
Yes. The motion to suspend the rules and adjourn to a workshop setting has passed. Dr. Schuler?
Thank you, Mr. Vroman. We have 3 items on the board's agenda tonight for committee of the whole meeting, and just by way of a quick recap. So we have really targeted for this year our agenda for your committee of the whole meeting centered as much as possible around your strategic plan and some of the key goals that you've set. So as the board knows, back in August, you approved a new strategic plan. At that same meeting where we approved the strategic plan, we identified 4 potential priority or goal areas for this year. One of those 3, Dr. Slaggy gave an update on, or kind of set a foundation for at your last board meeting around SEL, and what we're going to do tonight is bring a little bit of clarity around 2 of the other items. So before bringing the actual goal work plans to you, we've worked these through in discussion a couple of committees, but really wanted to set a foundation. So the bulk of the time tonight is actually going to be spent around MTSS and really trying to help kind of set a foundation for what is MTSS, why is it important enough that we've established it as a district priority area, so that we can bring a little bit of clarity around that. So Faith's going to lead that discussion, and then Erica's going to take you through the community engagement focus and goal for this year, and then we're going to end tonight with Charlie doing an update, kind of the annual human resource update, kind of let you know where we are. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Faith.
Great. I'm really excited to talk about MTSS. I know you've heard me talk about MTSS before, but I'm excited to be back because we've made some changes in our organizational chart, and there's some new opportunities for us to take us to the next level. I thought it would be really important to start out with just a little bit of history, and I may embarrass myself as I give this story a little bit because I don't know how long I've been doing this, but you need to know kind of the background of how MTSS started. Before 2015, MTSS was called RTI, or Response to Intervention. And response to intervention hasn't been in place for a really long time either. It came to be a requirement in the state of Illinois in 2008. But I think you need to know where it came from. So back in 1995, I was a principal, and I was brand new, and I was really hung up on how do you identify students for special education. It killed me that our way to identify students back then, and that wasn't a district thing, this was Illinois, this was the whole United States, is you had to have a discrepancy between how much a student could learn or their aptitude and where they were at. So you had to wait for somebody to fail dramatically to give them support. You also had to show that they were really discrepant from their peers. So imagine you're sitting there as a principal with first graders and you're like, you're not doing so well. But I gotta wait until you fail a little more to give you support. Made a big appointment with my director of special ed because I was a brand new principal, I was gonna change the world. He explained things to me and sent me back on my way, and we worked on things for a while. But to his credit, he became assistant superintendent, called me 2 years later, and he's like, there's this thing called response to intervention. Nobody really is working on it. Do you want to work on it? So he sent me to a couple of conferences, and I started this process in my own school, but quickly realized it was way more than identifying students for special education. It was a system that I could use to improve instruction in all my first grade classrooms. And I had English learner classrooms back then, gen ed, and I began to use this. And we had huge results. So much so that we made the front page of the Tribune. And pretty soon, my team and I were headed to Springfield to talk to the state board to talk about how do we get response to intervention everywhere. So parts of that conversation went well, parts of it did not. 2008, we had requirements for everybody to do that, so that went well. The thing that I did not do very well at that meeting, they said, well, what would you change? I said, please don't call it response to intervention, because that makes it seem like it's the student's fault. It's really more of our instructional practices. And if you call it response to intervention, people are going to think it's a special ed thing, and it's not. But they still call it response to intervention. And I also said, you have to make it about behavior too, but they didn't do that very well. But the good news is, they renamed it in 2015 for MTSS, and now it's about instruction. And the big changes, we've now added social, emotional, and behavioral pieces. So, given that, District 200 went through what many districts went through of an understanding that RTI is about special education and identification. So we are in the process still of educating staff that it's way bigger than that. And it's about these plans for improvement that we put in place so that all students, if I fast forward here a little bit, a way to assure that each student gets what they need to make the growth of their potential. Our vision statement. This is a way to get that accomplished. It's also a way for all these systems to work together to be really preventative to ensure early success in reading, math, and behavior. So the basis of this is that you have 3 tiers of support. And I want to give an example just talking about 3rd grade reading. So if I'm a principal and I'm really concerned about 3rd grade reading, this big large triangle called Tier 1 is what you worry about that every student is getting. What does reading instruction look like for every single one of our 3rd graders? And making sure that what we believe is good instruction is happening for everybody. You do some screener testing at the beginning of the year to identify students that are struggling and students that are way above, and you provide some differentiated core, but some of those students need intervention beyond what the classroom teacher can do. And we go to Tier 2, but that's in addition to what they were already getting. And you really have to worry about the strength of Tier 1, because the intervention for 25 minutes a day is not going to be sufficient if what they're doing for 90 minutes a day is not great. So you have to look at how do we identify students for Tier 2, look at those interventions, then what's happening in the interventions, keeping track of data, looking at all that. And our most severe students go all the way on to Tier 3. And we repeat this. We have assessments at the beginning of the year, the middle of the year, and the end of the year to identify these different areas. We do it every grade level for reading, for math, and now we're starting to do it for behavior as well. So as I said, we've got 3 tiers We've got what the universal is, tier 2 and tier 3, and every single one of those levels, we have to be worried about what is good instruction. You have to have an agreement upon here's what good instruction is and make sure that every single teacher and student are following that. Then at the bottom, you've got to have data to know how well instruction is working. Because if I'm getting data back that, first grade just isn't making it in my building or across the district, I have to be able to jump in. But I'm only going to know how to jump in if I know that good instruction, what we said is good instruction, is happening. That also goes to play for interventions. As I start a math intervention, I'm working with the middle school math labs right now, we have to have common expectations about what a math lab means and what good instruction looks like. I've got to be in there and the principals have got to know how it's happening, and then I've got to collect data. Because if you say response to intervention and say that I have 20 students in the intervention class, and then teacher comes to me and says, 19 of my 20 kids aren't making it, they need to go on for special help. That wasn't the students not responding to intervention, that was our intervention not working. So you have to know that your intervention is working for a majority of students before you can say, these students just aren't making it happen. Because it's more about our instruction and the support, and are we smart enough to figure out every child's needs than the student didn't respond to intervention. So at the district level, what does that look like? We have to define what's effective instruction in reading, math, and behavior. We've got to monitor it. And then we've got to have data that we look at all the time to identify opportunities for improvement as well as celebrations. For example, last year after meeting with the reading coaches, the math coaches, the elementary principals, looking at our data, talking to Julie, we said across the district, we really need to work on spelling, the encoding version of phonics at K2, reading comprehension, especially with guided reading at grades 3 through 5, and math fact fluency without anxiety building practices for math. Then we roll that out, and at the school level, they've got to reinforce all those things that I just said about reading and behavior and math, but tailor it to their school's needs. So they look at that and maybe math fact fluency, I've got my 3rd grade team, my 5th grade team's pretty good at that, we're not going to spend time, but 4th grade, we need to give them some support. So they tailor it to their own strengths and weaknesses, they go in and monitor that effective instruction is happening, and then they review the data not just by their school, but also by the grade level, the department, or the teacher. So at your school-based system, if you're a general ed teacher, this is what it looks like to be in this. You have a school improvement team that monitors tier 1 data, makes big plans. Then you have your PLCs, and they give up 3 of their PLC meetings to go over these benchmark data pieces to identify students that need to go to those next level of intervention. Plus, they review and decide what do we need to work on our own instruction. They have principals and coaches coming in and giving instruction and feedback based on the identified goals. Then at tier 2, now I'm that 3rd grade teacher again. I sat with my team, I put kids in reading interventions. Halfway through the first part of the year, we're going to get together and look at those kids and put them in 3 piles. It's a really quick meeting based on data on are they making adequate rates of improvement. These kids, they have made it, they are healed, go back to class. Other groups of kids, they're making progress and it's looking pretty good, but they're not caught up yet. We need to keep working at it. Then there may be a group of students that are just not making progress. And by progress, I mean enough progress to catch up. Because if you're 2 years behind, making 1 year's growth in reading you're always going to be behind. So we have to make even more rates of progress. It might be time for those students to have a change in intervention or to at least change the intensity. From an intervention provider, so if I'm a reading coach or a math coach, I'm now part of those PLC meetings where I work with the teams to talk about their data and identify students. Then I'm also part of that progress monitoring piece. Now, a big change, principals and psychologists are coming in to examine how I'm doing at delivering interventions. And then we're reviewing those interventions to know, was it the intervention successful for most kids or not? So some exciting progress that we've already made in this thing called MTSS. We've been working behind the scenes for a long time to have common expectations around reading and math and behavior. That's our reading framework and our math guides. We have math and reading interventions in place that we haven't had before, and we're really working on that at middle school level this year. We've got data assessments with district assessments and also through FastBridge to look at these pieces. We started this PLC structure so we have teams to be able to do that. And then we've had a lot of training, especially at K-8, with principals, psychologists, and coaches. So some examples of this preventative measure, just so you get a taste of what this can do. You know about it in reading it. We've had that for quite some time. And we identify a lot of students and work through them so they never have to be in special education. We catch them up to grade level, and for some of those students, they're never back in reading support again. We started that with math. What I want to highlight is the work at Jefferson. So, for example, at Jefferson, we have about 75 students each year at age 3 that qualify for really intensive specialized education services. Those students get older, about 75 of them go to our own kindergarten classes. By the time they go to kindergarten, 80% of them are back in general education without the need of a specialized special ed classroom, which leaves about 15 students that are. That goal in and of itself, that yay, those students are now equipped to go ready to read and have early numeracy skills, have the skills that they need, is a celebration in and of its own. But if that's not enough, look at the cost savings. This is just the cost of salaries divided by the number of students that are in the classroom. This doesn't go to the cost of equipping extra classrooms or the space that it takes. It's $1 million a year. These are the kinds of things, if we're really good at being preventative and using our resources collectively, that we already are doing and can do more at the other grade levels. So some things that I'm really excited to talk to you about. Now that special ed has joined my department, we will be able to collaborate on resources like we haven't always done before. And that will only cause more student achievement and reduce costs. For example, looking at our instructional aids. If we have more partnership between general education and special education on those, we can, I already know, reduce some of those aid positions and perhaps use that to do preventative things like behavioral coaches, like those kind. And I've had experience doing this before. I know we can do this again. Now that Chris is on board and we're talking about social emotional learning and behavioral piece, we're going to be able to have more emphasis of integration of all of those. If you don't have really great classroom management, or you're in a culture in a classroom that isn't conducive to taking risks, you can't learn reading and math very well. So we'll be partnering those two some more. We also have had special ed assessments for RTI and gen ed assessments. By combining those, we can take away some of our assessments and just work a little smarter, not spend as much time on our academic assessments. We also, I'm really liking my new partnership with Chris and Charlie. We are going, the three of us together, to all of the principal evaluation meetings where we talk about MTSS and school improvement. So that Chris is there to talk about SEL, we can talk about resources, I can talk about instruction, and it's the same conversation, elementary, middle, and high school, with all of our principals, talking about academics and behavior and how all of this plays into school improvement together. So, talked really fast. What questions do you have about our new work on MTSS or any more of the celebrations from what we've already accomplished?
I have two items. One is just a trigger word. You talked earlier about standardized approach. Do we have means to assess, monitor compliance to a standardized approach in our schools? I've never really thought of even asking that question.
I'm not sure that I...
So there's a standard program you want schools to follow.
Yes.
How do we know they're following the program?
So when we, like my math reflection guide that we've developed, the principals do their walkthroughs and their observations on that. I go through with my team and also Lindsay, who is our EL director, goes through and does that. And now I'm working with Erica Ekstrom, our new special education director, to also make sure that all of those interventions and pieces have those good pieces of instruction. So I've taken principals along with me. Some of the principals do part of their evaluation that I walk through their classrooms with them, so we have some inter-rater reliability so that we know that we're looking for the same thing. And then I meet with the math coaches and the reading coaches so that I make sure that they're talking about the same types of things and giving feedback in a similar way that I would give feedback about their instruction.
And then, thanks, that helps. Then the second question is, the last sentence on the slide, can you expand on that a little bit? Is that data showing up in our dashboard? Is that other things? How does that manifest itself?
Sure. So on reading and math, those pieces show up on our dashboard because we're talking about how we're doing on district assessments. It even goes into a little bit of how we're doing on park. We dive into it a lot deeper. When I'm talking with schools and school teams in the dashboard, we get into different subgroups. We get into doing comparisons by school, by grade level. We even look at comparisons on key standards that we know are going to make a huge difference on an impact on long-term instruction and academic improvement. So yes, the global piece shows up with that. With behavior, some of those things we already have, like attendance and those pieces, but we are still continuing to look at ways to monitor that social emotional piece, and that's going to be part of the work that the committee is going to be doing. We don't have on the dashboard, here's how well our Tier 2 instruction is doing, or here's how well our Tier 2 math labs are doing at those levels. And you have to be a little bit careful with that data because as you get better at this process, you get more severe students in those types of interventions and they have longer to make up. So you have to pay close attention to the trend data and what types of students and how low the students were coming in to be able to easily talk about their effective progress. Sure.
Hey, how does EL fit into all of this, especially at the younger grades when you're looking at, is it truly a learning situation or is it a language situation?
And wow, if I had a really great answer for that, I could retire and we'd be on the road. It was a really difficult, because we established what are adequate rates of improvement. So for example, if I'm working with third graders and I know that they should be able to read this many words per minute and they should make this much progress, I have that easily in my back pocket of how many words more each week they should be able to read. But you add an English learner into that and it gets very, very complicated because it also depends on what the background of the English learner was. The rate of improvement for an English learner that comes from a different country that they were very literate in their native language is going to pick up things a lot faster than a child who's never seen a book who's in 7th grade. So you have to do some comparisons of like peers, and we are still in the process of that. So for example, newcomers for English learners, you wouldn't want to compare their rate of progress with somebody who's been speaking English for the last 10 years and is in those. So you have to really get in and look specifically on how they are doing and their language acquisition at the same time. So what we encourage teams to do is look at their language acquisition, and we don't even start our students through this process until they're at least a level 3, which means that they can benefit from instruction in English, they can converse a little bit, because we don't want them sitting with a highly skilled reading teacher not being able to understand anything that's going on. So we wait until then to put them in interventions, and then we really have to be individualized with whether we would move them on to the next level and head them towards special education, because we've got to make sure that it's not just that they're slowly developing English.
So I was at Sandburg this week in multiple classrooms, and there were kids who were new to not only our town, our country, at all different levels and all different languages. So what kind of support are we giving that classroom teacher?
And it depends on the classroom teacher. Some of our teachers do have dual certification. So like at our early childhood center, everyone is dual certified. So they've got a lot of those skills already. So we're not hiring additional staff or looking at what that would look like. With our brand new students, they are pulled out if they're brand new to the country and don't have much English at all. We pull them out for services to teach them that for portions of the day. as soon as they're pretty proficient in getting around the classroom, getting around school, that piece, we would prefer that the services be pushed in, because students are learning English so much faster from their peers than they are from being pulled out and put in another room with students that also struggle with English. So you can't pick that up as well. So we are giving a lot of support and professional development to our classroom teachers on how to make a language-rich behavior. You may have seen the posters while you were at Stanford about the sentence starters for math talk, so that when the teacher is having a conversation about numbers, there are already sentence frames of it. I agree with your statement about because, and giving them some scripts and being able to have those words handy. We also put up word banks so that those math vocabulary terms, they're not trying to remember all of those. They're just able to pick out what few are on the board, and we use those.
I think there, Chris, you might know, do you happen to know at Sandburg, the number of FTE we have allocated for EL? Roughly?
I could look it up.
I want to say 3.5.
I think he told me 4.
Okay.
Around there, so it's
Okay.
around there.
Right.
I guess I'm thinking of
The classroom elementary teacher has to be an expert in so many subject areas and is trying to differentiate at so many different levels, and what kind of support are we giving them? That's my, when I see the reality of it as I walk through classrooms, I know what it's like having been a teacher. I just want to for the professional development is my concern there.
One of the things that's on Vision 2022 is to explore what co-teaching would look like at the elementary level, and we have 2 buildings that are piloting that right now, Lincoln and Pleasant Hill, where Lindsay and I have spent quite a bit of time teaching people how to do that, and we've clustered and arranged the classes so that our EL staff is only working with 1 grade level per EL staff member, and last year they might have worked with 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, and they've got to figure out all those different classrooms. We reorganized that so we have 1 EL staff member for all of 4th grade, and we've clustered students so that the EL teacher can be in there for 45 minutes of ELA plus 30 minutes of math plus science and social studies for each of those classes to help support. And that's not just to support the English learners, because the state has changed how we do EL instruction, that she also, or he, can take students from general ed if that's the reading level that they're at. So we're able to combine resources, and then the gen ed teacher is free to work with students that are slightly higher than that. And that's that breaking down of the silos that I talked about, where we can use staff, special ed, English learner, and gen ed to just meet all the needs that we need to meet.
I have a question. Can I assume at the earlier ages, particularly that if a child has a reading, they also have a math problem? Is that, no?
No.
It's distinctive?
Yep,
Okay.
and we have some students that have both. The reading discrepancy is actually a lot more common than the math. Statistically, if you have a math piece, you usually also have a reading, but you can have a reading without having a math.
And then I just want to understand now, we have the tiers of support. This is all on, I don't want to use the word intervention students, but, I assume there's another side of this, that we teach those that are high performers. And
Yes.
that's not part of this topic, or?
It is. So if you look back at this piece, we identify early on when we screen what are the students, the 4 PLC questions. What are we going to do with the students that are way above? What are we going to do with the students that are below? And how do we differentiate? And there are some students that are above and some students that are below that the classroom teacher can differentiate. There are other students at the top end and at the bottom end that need more pieces. So, for example, we have PACE at our elementary and our middle levels, and then we have different tracking systems at the high schools for those different levels. So this, while people don't talk about it a whole lot, you're right, it is to meet the needs of all students, and you do need to provide interventions for those students that are at the top end too. Sometimes we get really high into tier 3 and you just have a student that learns an unbelievable rate, and the team sits down and creates an individualized approach of what are we going to do for this particular student. So it does happen at both the high achieving end and the struggling end. And for behavior too.
So the intense support could be high or low?
Correct.
Okay. All right, and then once identified, again, I'm going to go back to kindergarten through 7th grade. Once identified, is the student labeled? Can they move out of those tiers? And where does they start over an evaluation each year or each 6 months?
Good question. At the elementary level and at the middle school level, we do this assessment 3 times a year. And you could have, especially at the K1-2, it's so fun to watch them, because you can just be in a totally different place at first grade reader, and just, they were developmentally ready, or it just started to click, and then they might never need that support again. So 3 times a year we do the screening where we identify some new students and maybe take some students off the list. But in between those times, so November and then again in March, the teams meet for the kids that are in the interventions and sort those students of those that don't need to be in the intervention anymore and go back to class, those students that might need continued support, and those that if they're not making growth, we need to intensify the support. So you can exit at the elementary level might only be 8 weeks that you would be in if you were that close and the intervention was that successful. Middle school, it's a little bit more difficult to move kids in and out of interventions because you have the schedules pieces, but even at the middle schools, we're creating scheduling around the math lab so that they can leave at the end of a quarter if they're all caught up.
In kindergarten, we have students that are probably 4 years old to 6 years old. How does that impact this? Is there a significant difference? And correspondingly, those that go through the Early Learning Center, how do we find those students perform or don't perform better or worse?
There's a range of students that come from the Early Childhood Center on how they do. Some of the students are coming in actually higher than our other kindergartners because they've had all that great experience and they've already had a lot of environmental experience with literacy and math. Some of the students come in and need some struggling. There's really a wide range. But a lot of the feedback as you sit with the kindergarten teachers, like, oh, I wish all of our kindergartners had that experience because they're actually coming in higher than a lot of our kindergartners that have just had a typical preschool experience or didn't have preschool experience at all. You had another question.
The 4-year-old versus 6-year-old.
Right. There is such a difference in developmentally where a child is at, especially when you go from just the phonics level to being able to actually read. And we don't want to get too worked up about a student that hasn't yet learned to read till about January of first grade. So before that, you're working on the early literacy skills, but if they haven't had preschool experience before, if they haven't been read to a lot, we have a lot of catch up to do. Or they're having cognitive growth spurts just like they have physical growth spurts. That you can look down and be like, your pants went to your ankles, last week, and now they don't. They're having that same bit of cognitive growth spurt where all of a sudden it just clicks and it happens at different rates. I try to tell parents that are a little bit worried, for most kids it's a lot like potty training. Like some kids do it earlier, some kids do it later, but we get the job done. Don't worry if it doesn't happen. You're not the first kid on the block that gets to those pieces. Some of it is developmental.
And then lastly, when we pull a student out for more intense support, do they fall behind the rest of the class?
So that's why I spend a lot of time with elementary principals on scheduling, because as you pull students out, we want to make sure that we're not pulling them out during math instruction, reading instruction, but something has to give. So what most of the schools do for the reading intervention piece, our reading framework is in 3 different areas where we have whole group reading instruction, we have small group reading instruction, and we have individualized reading instruction. And we try to pull students for interventions during that small group piece so that the teacher doesn't have all the students in the room at the same time, but she finds time to do that guided reading or small group piece when she has another 15, 20 minutes at a different part of her day that other students may be working on centers, maybe doing those pieces. Because you are exactly right. It gets complicated. The more intense need that a student has, the more time we need to pull them out to catch them up. And in some cases, especially if they're also an English learner, especially if it's reading and math, we have to make some hard choices. and diminish the amount of science time or social studies time that they need so that we can catch them up in reading. And my philosophy at K-1-2, if we can catch those literacy skills up, I can catch them up in science and social studies knowledge later. But if we don't, by the end of second grade, middle of third grade, really have literacy and basic math understanding shored up, we're just fighting a battle all the time after that.
Okay, can you go forward a couple?
Sure.
Keep going, too much. A little more, just to the early learning ones.
Okay.
One more. That.
Jim, I think part of your question though, this is where you do have a markedly different experience though for kids, meaning if as long as you're not waiting to fail, if a student is getting intervention while they're still benefiting from that core classroom instruction, you have a much stronger chance of getting child back to grade level. Once their total assignment is different, so a student that comes into kindergarten and really needs a more contained kindergarten environment, their trajectory through school is very different. It doesn't mean that they can't transition out of that much more intense support, but once students are really heavily into that tier 3 element where they're not getting a lot of their instruction through core classroom, the likelihood of kind of catch up at that point is much more difficult. And so that's kind of that point of, let's not wait to fail rather than have 80 kids coming into kindergarten with an intense need of support, take care of it early, and they have a markedly different trajectory through school.
I do have one last question. This sounds new to me, this approach. Maybe I'm wrong on that. But I guess the question I'm asking as a board overview, if I looked at this 5 years ago and today, are we doing something a lot different or identifying in a different way?
Yes, we're doing things a lot different than we were 5 years ago. If you go back to when I started here, we didn't have district assessments across the board that I could say, well, how are we doing at tier 1 and be able to do those pieces. We didn't have agreed upon this is where good facets of math instruction and reading instruction. And I didn't want to take away teacher autonomy because you need to have some teacher autonomy, but we need, and it's a joke at the committees, what are the truths that we hold self-evident is my phrase that I use about reading instruction, so that we have a common place to coach to, and we have a common expectation of what that looks like. We didn't have a way of going in and monitoring classrooms for walkthroughs to have a common way to talk about that. So now principals, the psychologists, this Friday I get to meet with the special education department and do it with them. We have common ways that we talk about what is good instruction so that everybody is on the same page and we can move collectively to do that. We're talking about SEL and behavior a lot more than we were 5 years ago. For the school improvement plan process, to have a screening and to talk about data, that wasn't a common thing when I came to the district. And it wasn't, I don't mean that it was because of me, but times have changed on how comfortable districts and schools are getting at using data to do those pieces. Also, that piece that's just been added on math coaches in elementary, if you think back to when we didn't have math coaches, I could talk with the principals about here's what's good instruction. Now I want you to identify the kids that are in need. We had nobody to help those kids that are in need, and it fell on the backs of the classroom teacher. There are some students that need more than what a classroom teacher can differentiate in order to catch them up. We spent quite a bit of resources and money trying to figure out last year. I wrote the grant so that we could have middle school reading interventions other than just the teacher trying to do her best to meet all those needs. What's a program that we can purchase, keep track of the data, and make sure that those interventions are working? Middle school math labs, they're trying their hardest, but every school had a different approach. So when I would sit down and talk with the principals, like, well, how do you identify? What are you doing? There wasn't a common way to talk about that. So this year, I'm meeting with all the math departments at the middle school level to shore up and continue on tier 1, but really to talk about what's going on in math labs to make sure that that extra hour that those students are giving up to go to math class is worth it. So some really common things about working on core, but there's also quite a few differences in the last 5 years.
Perhaps a more fundamental question, Faith. We've got math coaches to help in intervention on tier 2 for math. We've got reading coaches and reading teachers to intervene on tier 2 for reading. What about SEL? Who's doing the tier 2 interventions there?
Right, so one of the things that Chris and Charlie and I and Erica, but we're having all kinds of conversations with this new organization and new way of looking at those things. Our classrooms are having an increased need in managing behavioral and SEL pieces. And we've got 2 behavioral coaches that they're just super, super busy running around and trying to help with that. And we are looking at how do we give more support with that, and is there a way to utilize some of our current resources more effectively and create some of those types of positions, or to train some of our aides a little bit more proactively to be able to address those concerns. So you're right that that's an area that every building doesn't have a resource for that, and that is something that we need to shore up and look into. I know I didn't, you wanted to jump in?
I think you answered.
I guess I would just offer too, you do have your social worker and your psychologist built in as a somewhat of a support or a behavioral coach, but I would also support what you said as well. We've had conversations about that. So you do have some of those people that are in a coaching role once you get to a particular tier or more intensive behaviors. They go into coaching mode.
Can I ask you a question about math labs? Can you explain a little bit more specifically what that means? And is that just a middle school construct? And do we have something similar at the high school level?
So I'll answer the middle school piece and then the high school. When we do the screenings with our middle school assessments in math, and they look at not only the assessments, but grades and teacher input, and we especially look at our English learners on what we should do with that. We do identify some students, like we think you need a second period of math to be able to get that done. Each of our middle schools has at least one math lab per grade level for 6th, 7th, and 8th. 2 of our more larger middle schools had 2 sections at 6th grade. So that's an additional class. It's taught by a 6th grade math teacher if it's the 6th grade math lab. And we've reduced the number of 6th grade standards, and we say these are the absolute essential ones you need to get shored up on. Sometimes we even go back to 5th grade and look at some of those standards. We give a diagnostic assessment at the beginning to figure out where are they with 3rd grade standards, 4th grade, 5th grade, to be able to back up. And then part of that day is vocabulary instruction, part of it's fact fluency if they still need to go back and do that. And then they mirror and pre-teach what is about to happen in the regular class so that the students have some of that vocabulary and that understanding. So when the teacher says, today we're going to talk about factoring, they've at least heard about that and have some experience so that they can participate in class better. So tomorrow I'm at Monroe talking about that and making sure, because this is really the first year that we've established everybody should be doing these common things in middle school math lab. At the high school, we do have a couple of different versions of that. For some of our struggling students, we have co-teaching classes where they may have a math teacher and an EL teacher, or a math teacher and a special education teacher to divvy up and do those pieces. We also have at both of our high schools some people that are taking an additional class period to work on their skills in algebra or to work on their skills in geometry. That's much similar to high school, to middle school, but I haven't yet worked on with them of making sure that it's very similar and that they're collecting data to make sure. High school, it gets a lot more complicated to do MTSS, and that's not District 200, that's everybody, but that is coming toward high school of looking at data and identifying how are we doing and reflecting on our own practices to make sure that we're catching all students.
Any other questions?
Not even sure exactly how to ask this, but it's a financial question.
Okay.
So, is it safe to assume that the more students you have in tier 2 and tier 3 have more enriched and therefore more staffing, more cost? And okay, so if you look at, are there between our different elementary schools, say? Is there certain populations of students or demographics of students or whatever that might lead you to believe that you're going to have
Sure.
a higher cost within those
Yes,
schools?
for example, with our reading teachers, we've got a pretty complicated formula of how we allocate reading teacher staff. Some of it is the percentage of low-income students, because in general, not always, but in general, low-income students, you have more students that haven't come in with that vocabulary understanding and need some support with that. If the school has a higher percentage of English learners, there's more need to try to shore up that piece as well, so they need more support. So yes, there's a difference by school. I'll also tell you from experience as a principal and also watching, as we get much better at Tier 1 and Tier 2 at the younger grades, what you see is less of a need for Tier 2 and Tier 3 at the upper grades. So some of the resources that you are using down here, you no longer need for those students that have been in the interventions that we've caught early.
So, getting to my core question, and follow up to that, so I think this maybe is a budgeting question. Didn't the law change in the state where we have to kind of budget revenue expenses by school? And as such, are we going to begin to see these differences in MTSS, the cost for MTSS be indicated through our individual schools?
Yeah, possibly. So this will be the first year that there will be some data that shows budget allocation by building. There are two variables, obviously, that are going to impact what that's ultimately going to look like. One is just the number of staff you have. So if you're at a building where you have 4 EL teachers, 4 reading teachers, additional psychologists or support, social work staff, right? Obviously, that's just more staff. Costs are going to be higher. The other variable that we have a little bit less control over, although we obviously control where folks are assigned, is just the cost of the individuals that are there. So if you have a younger staff, if you have more teachers in their first 4 years, the likelihood is the cost to educate is a little lower than it is if you've got 4 teachers at a grade level that are toward the end of their careers. That's kind of the way that salary, but I think that is part of kind of the conversation that's driving all of that, Brad, is wanting to make sure that not only are school districts aligning the resources where the needs are, meaning, yes, if you have a student demographic with more need, they should have more resources to address that need, but that you're also making sure that the assignment of staff is equitable to that student population. So, we don't see that a whole lot. There isn't truly, we don't have a ton of like internal transfer, meaning, we don't have a building where staff are there and after 2 or 3 years they say, get me the heck out of that building and go, somewhere else, but that's part of what that's, I think, seeking to address.
Yeah, and so that would be interesting in future years as a board when we look at those costs per student, that there's multiple factors behind it.
Okay, thank you very much. Next item on our agenda is community engagement. Dr. Stewart?
It's community engagement, Charlie. But, yeah, I know, you were ready to go, I could tell.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
So Erica is going to walk the board through our community engagement goal that we spent some time with the Community Engagement Committee, I think, a little over a week ago. And again, just kind of walk you through, I think, some of the key activities that we've identified for this year to affirm certainly our commitment to engaging, being fully transparent, and working with our community. So, Erica?
Thank you. And if it's okay, I'm going to sit because we'll do a little tour of some things that are on our website and things that we're working on. So our Community Engagement Committee did meet last week and we reviewed this plan. So thank you for your feedback. And actually one thing based on Rob's feedback that I need to add to this is under our indicators of accomplishment is increasing the readership of the District 200 Newsroom. And so I'm going to talk about that here in a minute, about that new feature that we added this year and show you what that looks like. And so a lot of what you'll see on here, aside from once this is in final form, we'll have the newsroom. A lot of this is not very different than what I reported out on June, which was our plan that we set forth for this year. We just put it more in, made it in some areas more specific and broke it down by month so that we could really knock things off, check things off our list and make sure that we were really addressing that plan that we set forth. And so a few things that you'll notice on here that I just want to call out is that towards the end of the summer, we did transition all 21 of our websites to a redesign. That redesign was really based in large part on feedback from parents primarily, but also staff and community members that things were buried on our websites. And so we really spent a lot of time with that design, and I hope you've seen from even the time that you spend on the district site that most of the things that people go to frequently on our website should be accessible from the homepage. And so those, a lot of the 8 buttons that you see on the homepage of the website should be, when I say buttons, I mean like calendar, staff directory, parent view, student view, and then these 4 buttons should be the top things that people look for on our website. But then also importantly are mega menus, so we can call out more options for people to choose from, reorganized even the Board of Education section. Our departments are organized by, or alphabetized, and then I really like how we were able to restructure the parent section of our website too. And so really what these mega menus do is truly pull things out to the homepage of our website. So maybe it may not be when you first go to first blush, but then things are available much more easily. The schools are loving this I want to feature. So I want to call in sick, I want to find a lunch menu, and you can easily click on those are the top 10 things that parents want to do on our websites. And so that feature has been very popular there. But our website is our primary communication tool in addition to social media and hopefully our newsroom, but this is our primary communication tool with our parents and our community members. And if they're having to dig, we all are users every day of online and digital resources. We have very little tolerance for having to dig to look for things, and so our parents are no different. And so we wanted to make sure that our primary communication tool with our parents was functioning and was acceptable. So we're really happy with the redesign.
What are the other 20 websites? I don't understand.
20 schools in one district.
Okay.
So 20.
So each school has one.
Each school has a new. We did create and distribute those Connect With Us cards, so all board members received stacks of those that members of senior leadership have got them in our pockets, our purses, and all of those items are always available either in the superintendent's office or in my office, just sitting on my table. So if you're ever around and you want to come by and grab a stack of those community calendars, that's also on here, or those Connect With Us cards, please feel free to grab those. And then I'm sorry, I'm going a little bit out of order, but I do just want to call attention to the District 200 Newsroom in terms of a new parent and community engagement tool. So previously, when I would push out a monthly board highlights, I'd push that out via email and it would get archived on the board section of the website. If I pushed out a Focus on Learning newsletter, it would get pushed out via email and it would get archived in the communications section of the website. If we pushed out a communication from Dr. Schuler, get archived on the superintendent section of the website. Now we have one central newsroom where any story that we put out, whether it's information or a great classroom story, is in this District 200 newsroom. So it's accessible, this newsroom is accessible from all 21 websites from their homepage. That is a common icon that's on all of our sites. And the URL for that is friendly, so it's CUSD200.org/news, takes you directly to this page. And what I like about this is that it looks like a newsroom and a news site, and it allows you to have multiple stories in a they're very mobile friendly. So if you're ever on your reading this from your mobile device, you'll see that it looks like a social media feed from your mobile device. And it allows us to put lots of great celebrations and news in one central location. It's easy to click around and easy to access. But what I love too is the way that it renders on our social media feeds. So if I post a story here, then I post the link on our Facebook from this site. The picture looks great. It's got a headline. People are loving it, and we are getting a lot of reach. I will say, just in the last week, we reached 20,000 people just on our Facebook page alone. That is huge, and that continues to increase. And so that is one of the reasons that we have in our indicators of accomplishment is really increasing that social media analytics. So we are starting to track that now on a weekly basis. How many followers do we have on our Facebook and our Twitter and our Instagram? What is our reach? What is our engagement? How many people are watching our videos, so that we can really be strategic in where we're directing our efforts. But this newsroom has been a great central location for all the good news and informational pieces that we want to push out to the community.
Can we tell who those people are? You say there's 20,000 people. I mean, demographically, age-wise, students and parents, or parents of students, I should say.
I have not done that, but I can tell you it's 20,000 individuals.
Okay. Is it possible that you tell me?
I will look into that.
Eric, I have a question on the report of safety issue.
Yeah.
Who is monitoring that, and is somebody getting that right away? Like
Sure.
if somebody had a real concern, is it going like boom to somebody quickly?
So this report a safety issue button is on all 21 of our websites too. That's standard. And so when you click on that, it takes you to this site with a tip line down here. You can put your tip or your concern or your question here. You select a category. You select what organization it relates to, what school it relates to, and then you can put, you're forced to put some contact information on here, whether it's your actual contact information or not. I can't verify that, but should someone submit a tip, and they can also do that on their mobile device too, through the mobile app that we have, that is immediately sent to me and to Dr. Kyle. So as our safety officer, we both get those to make sure that one of us is getting those and that we are following up with it. We've probably gotten, since we launched this, maybe 6 emails. When the school year started, they were all parent view questions, and we did get one concern about some just kind of when a child was walking to school, that there was some commotion in a park, but we quickly worked with the Wheaton police to kind of resolve that issue, and so that was a great use of the tip line there. So haven't really seen much activity on it, but it is good that both of us get those emails at the same time, so one of us is making sure to follow up on that.
Was there a tip about the large cat around that?
No.
I was going to ask you a question, but is it the mountain lion?
Yes.
So that tip line, which is new, how confident are we that a broad swath of our parents are aware of that? I mean, I saw something I think it was the Edison Facebook page, that there was a surprise that this was new, and how do we miss this? Are we confident that we push this out to everybody who's on our email address or through the individual schools at curriculum night?
So I have pushed out multiple communications, like through a focus on learning, that this new feature is on all of our websites. And whenever I do a walkthrough of our website, when I launch them with our principals, with our school secretaries, with our PTAs, that's one of the things that I point out to everybody. And we have encouraged our principals to feel free to share that out with their parent community. Could we do a much better blitz of pushing that out? Absolutely.
That's going to be a challenge every year, right? As new parents come in, and it's only as useful as parents who know that it's there.
Is that one of the I wants, by the way?
Yes.
Isn't it? Okay.
So, we do still, just some things that are on here monthly, we do still plan to do at least one Facebook Live event comment monthly, do a monthly board highlights email that following your business meetings that I do post individual. So when I put your board highlights out, if there's 3 sections in those board highlights, each one of those sections becomes its own story on the Newsroom, so I can post them individually on social media, which I think increases the readership of that as well, because they're posted individually rather than the whole big long highlights. So we will continue to have those monthly, and then also 2 to 3 focus on learning emails monthly as well.
Before we turn the page on that, I saw the Vision 22 video, the State of the Schools video. Is that out? Okay, coming. Okay.
So we did move our annual State of the Schools address to a video format, and so that should be available early next week. And our plan with that is really, in addition to pushing that out electronically through our social media and our e-news, is to our annual, kind of how we do our State of the Schools road shows, where we go to the various service clubs, chambers of commerce. Rather than Jeff delivering a PowerPoint presentation, we will share the video. It will be up to 7 minutes. I haven't seen the final version just yet, but it will be up to 7 minutes, and we will show the video and then certainly entertain any questions that people in the crowd have. So we hope that will, condensing that to a shorter format and through video will allow our message maybe to be a little bit more clearer, and also give people the opportunity to pull certain nuggets away that they walk away from. I think that sometimes delivering such a lengthy presentation was a bit overwhelming for people, to where they felt like they left with a lot of really, really great information, but might not have been able to say, oh, did you hear about the new business incubator, that Shark Tank class that they have at the high school? Or they just did 19 major construction projects over the summer. Wow, that's a lot of work that they're doing. And so we want to make sure that people have those talking points that they can then take and share with their friends and neighbors through word of mouth. So we did add in here too, just from what you saw in June, to our execution of a referendum information campaign. Certainly we weren't aware of that in June, and so we did have to add that in. And so just by way of the Community Engagement Committee did review our information campaign plan at that meeting as well. We have 2 of 3 mailers that have been distributed in all mailboxes. The 3rd one should be coming within the next week or so. Our second mailer invited community members to a series of town hall events that I've gotten multiple phone calls of appreciation already that we selected. I think we talked about this in our committee meeting, that we selected various dates and times. So we have 2 evenings, 2 weekday evening sessions, 1 weekday morning session, and 1 weekend town hall too. So we've gotten positive feedback on that already. And so we will have those 4 town halls, and certainly we'll be continuing to use all of our digital media sources to continue to push information out about the referendum leading up to November 6th.
Question on this. Town halls, that's probably going to be a broader issue than just the referendum. We're going to get a lot of input about a lot of different things. Are we going to kind of have a summary document of that, a deliverable, something that says here's what we heard, and rather than night by night, but kind of the whole process of town halls?
Yeah, we certainly can. To be honest with you, Brad, I haven't really thought to like an end deliverable, but if that's something that the board would like, a summary at the end, we certainly can do that.
Yeah, I can only make it to 1, so I certainly would like that summary.
We've had, how many mailers related to the information on the referendum?
2.
Okay, the first one, I think we all reviewed, and we all had a lot of comments. And, I had varying opinions, but I've had some really good feedback from it, much to my surprise. The way it was written, I thought would be not as effective, but I have had good response to it. So I'm glad that I wanted to say that.
I have as well. There's some good feedback on it.
I think so.
And I like the fact that number 2 did not look like a campaign mailer. Very different. So I thought it was a Halloween postcard.
That was definitely a point of conversation at our committee meeting and going back and forth about especially the colors and how it relates to one of our high schools. But either way, I've heard, I mean, that's the first reference that I've heard to Halloween, but any point that anyone's made, it leads to, as Jeff said, but you read it. So that's all that's important. So our third mailer will focus more on the full details of the referendum question, frequently asked questions, more information about Jefferson. And so some people have asked that. We haven't really put out a lot of information about Jefferson. That it will be the primary content of the third mailer. And
Erica,
so,
while you're there, would you mind, can you pop to the website?
yes.
And you want to just kind of show where all of that information is also housed on the website, so anything that's gone out.
So when you go to the homepage of our website, sorry, just refreshed, the first announcement that you see, so this section of the web is basically just timely announcements that we want to call people's attention to. So the first announcement will be until November 6th, referendum information. You can also access referendum information. We changed that button on the homepage of the website. We don't need an enrollment and registration button right at this time of year. You can still get to it certainly from our website. And then also if you hover over facilities and engagement, the first section that you can access right there is referendum information. And they all take you to the same place, which the friendly URL that you don't see up here is just CUSD200.org/referendum information. And so to help make it more searchable on Google as well. And so when you get to this section of our website, you'll see the landing page is basically the content that was included in your first community mailer, the messaging surrounding that. This referendum information here, this is the content that you will see in the third mailer that's coming out. And that third mailer, I should say too, is going to be our primary handout. So it's designed in a way that we can, all of these we've been printing in-house, but that's the primary source of information. If people need it, that's what we hand them. But so this is the content that you see here, just what is Jefferson, what is the question that you'll see in November, and some of the answers to the kind of frequently asked questions. Those, while they're not stated as questions maybe on this page, here they are on the Just the Facts page. So these are the frequently asked questions that we've heard. Certainly, as you hear questions that you don't see that are on here, please make sure to share those with us. And we will kind of keep track of them here at the office so that if we are hearing this question really coming up frequently, that we will add a response to that on this page.
Can I just add one thing to that as well? And just I think a good reminder, certainly for board members, part of the goal of having questions here is that especially out in the social media space where conversations can get circular, nasty, very, very personal, when stuff is posted that's clearly not accurate, our goal in having a landing spot like this is to be able to go in and address posts rather than like address them personally, like, you know, I can't believe you said that. You can address it by just saying factually, you'll find that information here. So it kind of keeps out of the mud of some of the conversation, but just kind of takes everything back to a factual landing spot. So if somebody's posted something that doesn't appear to be accurate about tax impact, we can bring people right back to where they'll find that information, and that will also be useful to others that may be engaged in those conversations as well.
Are we getting a lot of questions right now?
Not a ton. No, I mean, not directly. I mean, you know, Eric, you might have a better handle. I mean, not a ton. I really have not gotten a ton.
I have gotten some, probably not quite a dozen phone calls since the two mailers have gone out. I'm happy, very happy that they're actually people who no longer have kids in our schools. So their kids are aged out of our schools. So they're reading what we're sending. The questions that they're asking are the exact questions that we have posted on our website, primarily around, how is this really not gonna raise my taxes? Are you sure about that? And why are you going to referendum? Those have been the top, at least from the recent phone calls that I've gotten in the last 2 days, those are the top 2 questions.
How many questions are on there if you slide down?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
And that will be updated as
Yes.
more questions or commentary?
Yes.
And the goal is to try to make sure that we're somewhat careful in selecting the questions that go up there. That could become a really, really, really lengthy document then where you kind of lose sight of all of the questions. So obviously everything that's come, we certainly haven't put up there, but just those that we've seen, I think, a little bit more regularly. The other thing I was going to mention, I think, Jim, just in response to what you said, well, I've not had a ton of direct questions. I have certainly found in the last couple of weeks that I have more people unsolicited just mentioning to me, I'm aware of the referendum. Less than even in 2017, just I think word is out, which is that's half the battle, is at least in trying to make sure that people go on November 6th and don't encounter the referendum question for the first time without any background that it's there.
I think that the number of people that, comment to you, and I'm finding it, are more supportive as a rule of and ones in the past may not have been supportive of other prior referendums and didn't say that for that reason. So I think that's a positive sign.
So I've read these questions, they're great. Can you imagine as we get closer to Halloween, which is closer to election day, maybe pushing one question out at a time, once every couple days, and here's this question, and then 2 days later, here's this question.
And this would also, again, make an easy piece, if need be, to print out and share with people as an additional walk piece if needed.
And so just to that point, early voting starts tomorrow. So once we have those full details information pieces ready, we'll make sure that you have those too, so that we are doing a full court press and making sure that people have the information that they need about this referendum. So I don't want to take up too much time, but we've gone through month by month and just listed our primary activities, especially the ones that we want to call out. And certainly this is not the totality of all of our community engagement efforts. Even that big placemat, as Dr. Schuler likes to call it, is not completely the totality of our efforts. But one thing that we started talking about, referendum information campaign, but one thing that you will also note on here that's different from in years past is the revamp of our K through 12 handbooks, student handbooks. And so we will start working on that, just reviewing feedback, working on a redesign, and then bringing those to you revamped and redesigned next spring. Certainly we will keep the board engaged as we're moving through that process. And this is not the final version. We will put it on our pretty template and make it branded and all of that. So,
just one follow-up question. The town hall meetings. Okay, the focus of that is general information. The dates of those again are all before the referendum. Correct. So I mean, we anticipate to be that being the topic.
Erica, thank you. Thank you for all the work you've done. I've said to any number of people, I think our community engagement plan is outstanding, has been for the last 4 or 5 years, and I appreciate the work you've done. I also appreciate the work of the Community Engagement Committee. Not only in working in a referendum organization or mailing organization plan, but to hop on it so quickly and to address it. Thank you for your work on that as well.
Jim, I'll make something too. And I'm going to make these comments from a business perspective. So we've been thrilled to see rated the 8th best school district in the state, the 27th best town in America, which was also the #1 in Illinois. But all those mentions were about school district. And this is really all about promoting our successes good information, kind of defining our brand out in the market of realtors and communities. So while this could be viewed as, the sole purpose of this might be viewed as how to get information out, but it serves a purpose to kind of make people know of our success, of how great our school district is. So it does provide, and that then translates into some of these ratings, which translates into people wanting to live here, which translates into property values going up, and it's a cycle. So I think this is the success of this community engagement and outreach program is an integral part of all those elements. So to what you said, I think, where we've taken this in the last 5-6 years is really, I think, part of some of those ratings. So super critical, and I applaud you and the staff for pushing this out.
One quick item on the, you thanked the committee. Could you identify who the committee is? We change year after year sometimes, but give that recognition and by name. And that'd be true on any reference we do to committees in the future.
Sure. The committee is comprised of Chris Crabtree and Rob Hanlon. And so shout out to both of them and to Eric as well. So we move on to the agenda. Human resources is the next item. Dr. Kyle, are you ready? I hope you are.
I was so excited I tried to jump in front of Eric. So I know I'm at the end of the presentation, but okay. Some of you have seen this before. Obviously, it's about my 3rd month in the district, but you talked a lot about what I'm going to use marketing going forward. We're the 8th best school district in the state of Illinois. We're #1 in Money Magazine. So in the spring, when we want to get teachers for hard fulfilled positions, we're going to be using that to sell how great Wheaton is. So a couple things we did last year. This is always a year in the rear. So 331 staff.
Wheaton Warrenville.
Wheaton Warrenville, CUSD200. Wheaton Warrenville School District. It's an incredible school district. The things we have going for us. This is what we did in the past year. Hired 170 guest teachers, processed 145 leaves of absences, which was kind of high, but we went through that. Coordinated student teachers, screened volunteers, and had 72 FOIAs. I'm actually very good with FOIAs lately.
All from one person?
Not all from one person, but you do 12 months out of the year, 72. You do the math. We get a couple over here and there. So a couple things with staff. I know as the board, having 8 years of balanced budgets, you can tell we've kind of maintained a stable FTE, just increased 2. And then classified increase 3. So we're staying within our budgeted areas. Retention, I know you're a savvy board, and you're probably knowing that last year was 97%. So the first thing when you looked at it, you're probably asking 95%, why did we go down? We've already looked at that. We did have about 10 more teachers leave our district to go to another district, and some of those were, the guy's a sophomore coach here, wants to be a varsity coach somewhere else. Sometimes they leave for high school districts, and sometimes they leave because the job's closer to home. We also had a lot of leaves. A couple slides ago, I showed you some leaves. We had those teachers come in for a year. It's only a one-year contract, and then they have to resign. So that's why we went down 2%, but 95% is nothing to I'm excited about. When you think of a culture and you think of a school district like Wheaton Warrenville, School District 200. There are always going to be some people that come that we think fit the bill when we hire them, and our culture is so strong, sometimes they don't fit, and they move on. We don't want 100%. I mean, when I've also looked at all HR, you really don't want 100%. So if you look at labor statistics, usually in education it should be 21%. We're at 5%. We're only losing 5%. That's really good. So I know we may have dropped 2%, but to me that's a good number. A couple things that are hitting us, and I think we've talked about at other school board meetings, is I don't know what it is. It could be just people bash education a lot. For a while, there were no jobs. I mean, when I came out of college, I got very lucky to get a job that was hard. There were too many candidates and not enough jobs. What you're seeing nationwide and in Illinois is there are just less and less people who are going in the profession of education. Phi Delta Kappa just did a study, and for the first time, it's not as a favorable position as it used to be. So there's something that's coming our way, And when I say challenges, I kind of use some things from this year because we talked about assistants. 27 vacancies, we called over 150 candidates who interviewed for jobs in the last month. They either already have jobs or they're doing something else. We're trying to fill those positions. We went from 47 to 27, but it's getting harder and harder. So what you're finding with the shortage of teachers is it's harder to get assistants because that was where our pool was. So you heard Faith talk about some of the things we're going to put our heads together. We're going to look at ways that we can maybe look at the resources we have, and right now don't even have filled, to use them differently to service our students. And then when you look at nurses, bilingual, social workers, foreign language, it's the specialty ones that are becoming harder and harder to hire. But what I will say, and I'll give kudos to the board and the Wheaton Warrenville Education Association, the contract that was signed, and now we're in a 4-year contract, is really going to put us and me in a better position to hire these specialist positions. Really, that's a positive that I look. And one of the things I'm going to share, and I won't get too much in the weeds because I know I'm the last presentation, but last year, the assistant superintendent in the school district I left let me come with him to all the different colleges to recruit teachers. And I was at a high school that had some really hard to find teaching positions. And we hired 70% of the people from that high school, all from the job fair. So we are going to hit U of I. We're going to go to Northern. We're going to go to ISU. I know we're Wheaton, Warrenville School District. I know we're great. But I want to be selling this to all the new grads and getting out there and getting the best ones early. So we're going to work on that. I just feel like this school district sells itself. I get it. But we're in a harder market now, and I want to go out and try and get them earlier. So those are some of the things we're going to work on. That's kind of the overview with the HR department. Obviously, with this school year, it really didn't have much to do with what I'm presenting here. Dr. Rammer and Christy Kuntz and all the ladies in the department have done a great job. But our goal looking forward is, what did we do last year? How can we continue to get great candidates into all of our classrooms, and how can we use our resources? Because if there is a situation where we're struggling to hire assistants, maybe we need to look at that differently with some of the FCL that Chris is in charge of and Faith talked about. So we are going to look at some things that I think will be positive, and I'm excited about the future of Wheaton Warrenville School District 200. So any questions?
Couple of years, oh, I'm sorry.
Permanent guest teachers or substitutes. I know that that's been a newer concept in the last few years. Have we increased the number of those that we have, especially, I know maybe more middle school. I know high school can do a lot of it internally, but elementary and middle school, how are we doing with that?
I know I looked at our numbers and we're where we were last year. Substitute like a teaching assistant, the pool is getting smaller, but the state is making it easier to get more subs and giving us opportunities to have short-term subcontracts where it's cheaper, a couple years. So the regional office education, the state's making it a little bit easier. They're also adding more days for retirees to sub. So they've expanded the amount of days for retirees to come in. So we're going to capitalize on all those things when it comes to substitutes. We also got a list just last week from the ROE of over 150 people that want to sub. So we're contacting them and saying, hey, if you're not in our district, come to Wheaton Warrenville School District 200. So we're trying to get as many as we can because it's good now, but when you get to the spring on a Friday, we need subs. So we're stable of where we were last year. We're trying to get more, but there's also a balance. If you have too many subs and you don't have enough jobs, that's not good either. So we kind of have to find that sweet spot of how many subs we want, or guest teachers we want to have. Sorry about that.
Just same question.
I love the idea of going to the universities and the whole notion of recruiting. I had never pictured, and we do it all the time in my job, but I had never thought about it in terms of a local government. So I think it's a great way to think about it. I'm assuming you have brochures and stuff. The 8th best district in the state and all those.
You guys kind of
wrote the brochures. They're going to be easy to, it's going to be easy to sell our product. And then we're going to bring different principals to different locations. So it's just day trips. Let's go to these colleges, and even psychs. We have a psych at each school. So there's a couple schools that produce psychologists. So we're going to have John, who oversees all the psychs, go to those colleges and try and get those recruits right as they get out, before they even graduated, to try and get them in our district. So
we are gonna try and find them where they're at and bring them in here, because once you get into Warrenville School District 200, you really don't wanna leave. This is a great district. As I find out more and more, as a student and now as the assistant superintendent. There's great things about what we do, and what I found just being a principal last year is, you know, we'll have the most people in the line. We'll have hundreds of teachers in our line. And really what you're trying to do during that time is really be quick with your interviews and see, do we need this? Is this person someone we want to wait, spend more time? And then what we would do is distribute that out to the principals. Here's some great people we found, and here's some people I would look at when you have openings. So it would be distributed to everybody.
Any other questions from board members? Brad?
One thing that just occurred to me is many teachers, and I know of a few who leave to, you know, be the mother of their family, you know, just leave the profession to be a mother. Do we ever contact those teachers that left and explore interest in them coming back?
From my understanding from talking to the Human Resources Department and Christy Coons is we do speak to all the teachers that leave, and that is part of just leave the profession. We do keep statistics on that. Do they come back to our district? I don't know if we've tracked that, but we do know that that is one of the reasons why teachers do, you know, resign, is because they have other priorities for 10 to 12 years, but that is one of the reasons why.
Sometimes they join the school.
Yeah. I was going to say, I would have a very hard time going to a school district and getting a job, because when you leave with so many years and you have an advanced degree, it's really hard to take them back. So that would be.
Because of money.
I think we're always looking in our district to make sure that we're fiscally responsible, but that doesn't mean that we don't bring teachers in that have great qualifications. We try to balance it. We always do look at the bottom line, but we're not just picking BA1s all the time. And in fact, as you saw the list of the ones that are harder to fill, those are the ones that are becoming more and more flexible of how many years experience you've had.
And Jim, just two things I want to offer really quickly. One, was at a LUDA board meeting today, and what we're experiencing, so again, I know, Dr. Kyle said, we don't have to hit the panic button yet around that drop in retention rate, but that is a very, very, very common thing that school districts are experiencing, while I'm saying we're not hitting the panic button yet, I think that's a trend that's going to continue to exacerbate. Just a lot more movement within the educational profession, because very, very candidly, the demand is now getting to a point where it's much higher than the supply, right? And when the variable shifts like that, strategies around HR become much, much, much more important. So the thought of going to job fairs, that's not new in education. Pre-2005, districts were doing that all the time. It was a very regular practice. It's just when the pendulum shifted and there wasn't as much of a need, we didn't have jobs, more districts were cutting staff than hiring staff. You just didn't need to invest in those strategies nearly as much, but I think that's coming. I've heard stories, certainly from colleagues in other parts of the state, of jobs that are posted and they can't get an applicant for a position. I talked to colleagues today that started the year with 25 classroom positions filled by a substitute because they cannot find a certified teacher to do that. So this teacher shortage, I'm telling you, is going to be a problem here in a couple of years. We tend to be insulated by it for a couple of years, so when kind of the collars and further out start to experience, we're a couple of years away from really seeing it, but it's coming. I think HR is gonna take on a whole new significance for us in the next 3 to 5 years. It's not going to be, we're not going to enjoy some of what we've had to some degree with that retention rate and ease in hiring positions. So I'm not trying to put the board in a panic. I just want to make you absolutely aware of the fact that what we're seeing around TAs, what we're seeing around those positions is just it's going to continue to make its way. The supply's just not there of teachers.
Thank you, Dr. Schuler. We've already addressed the next item on the agenda, which is public comments. So, there being no further action to come before the board, I'll ask for a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting. Moved by Mrs. Crabtree,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Paulson. Mrs. Hutchinson, I'll just ask. All those in favor, please, of adjourning, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
No opposed? We are hereby adjourned.